Welcome to Fit After 40, the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. Kinsey here, certified personal trainer and menopause coaching specialist. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the past 12 years and know firsthand how intimidating starting a fitness routine can be, especially in perimenopause. My goal is to teach women in midlife and beyond how to feel strong and confident in their bodies and to help them live the healthy life they deserve, free of pain, heart disease, dementia, frailty, you name it. In this show, you'll get action steps you can take today, backed by the most up-to-date research and thousands of hours of practical in-gym experience. The best time to get started may have been 20 years ago, but the second best time to get started is today. Hello, and welcome to the Fit After 40 Women's and Health Fitness Revolution podcast. Kinsey, we're back. Hello. This is another future cast, as in I am recording this on the 1st of October in preparation because the day of this release, I know, I look at calendars, is going to be September 22nd, and this is a very fun little date because it's sandwiched between two big events. I don't want to say equally big because one is my wedding, and that is very big. That's like, milestone. Woohoo, we did it. Hopefully everything went off wonderfully, and there are lots of pictures out, and there was lots of dancing. We're still enjoying ourselves. And then the second thing, so our wedding was on the 18th, and the first online menopause and muscle workshop is coming your way on the 28th. If you haven't saved your spot already, what are you doing? Pause this podcast, jump down to the show notes, and get your spot because it's free $99. That means free. It's no dollars. It is an incredible way for you to not only have an opportunity to ask your questions at the end, but to really deep dive with this kid into all things menopause and muscle. So we're talking 30,000 foot view of what is going on inside of our bodies during our menopause transition. We are talking little recap on the hierarchy of health and how it plays in to our menopause transition. We're talking about the importance of muscle as we age and why it straight up is a non-negotiable for a healthy, vital aging. We're talking the R&R of how to build muscle. Today, it's going to sound familiar. We're sort of getting a sneak peek of one of the things we're talking about, which is the 3 S's to keep in mind when we talk about resistance training. We wrap it up with what doesn't build muscle because that is just as important, since a lot of people that I've worked with in the past have wasted a lot of time and energy on things that just simply don't build muscle, and that's a real bummer if that's one of your goals. And then we give you some action steps that you can take away today to get started. Like I said, it is going to be so fun. I've done a couple of these workshops in person now, and I love every second. People have great questions. They get really involved. They take notes. It makes my heart so happy. I just can't even tell you. Like I said, I can't say it's on the same level as my wedding, but I don't know. Is it bad if it's close? Okay, team. So today we are diving in, like I said, to one of the topics that we will be brushing on in the menopause and muscle workshop so that you can kind of have an idea of what it's going to look like. Today, we are talking about the 3 S's of where to start with resistance training. Real fast, we've talked about defining resistance training in the past. Colloquially, I think it gets confused with strength training, and strength training is a type of resistance training, but resistance training is when we are resisting load with our body against gravity. The difference between strength training and hypertrophy, as we've talked about in the past, hypertrophy, in fact, last week and before on the podcast, hypertrophy, which we are really focusing on when we are 40 plus, because we are trying to keep and build muscle on our frame so that we age strong and healthy and vital. Hypertrophy is the one style of training that actually is going to change the width of your muscles and really challenge your bone. Although strength is for bones too. Let's just stick with muscles. Hypertrophy is the one style of training that's going to challenge and change the width of your muscle fibers. Strength, especially after you've been training for a while, is primarily a neurological response. So it's our brain's response to lifting more and more load. So for the sake of getting it sort of more true to what we're talking about, I will be calling it resistance training. There's a chance I'll forget and say strength training because, like I said, colloquially, that kind of just has slipped in. But we really are talking about how to use resistance training for building muscle. And the way to use resistance training from building muscle is a shout out to Maria from Sound of Music. We start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. You know I love a musical, so sorry, not sorry. So we start at the very beginning. We've talked about this on the podcast, Afraid to Lift Heavy Shiz. That's okay. Start here instead. We do not, when we are strength training, just rip heavy weights off of a dumbbell rack, right? We're not suddenly like back rowing 40-pound dumbbells. No. Your body is not ready for that. Your nervous system is not trained. Your form is not trained. Nothing is ready. Nothing is ready yet. Even, hear me out, unpopular opinion. Fact, even if you've done this before, if it's been 6-ish months since you've done it before, maybe even 3, give yourself permission to start with the foundations to make sure that you're really getting your body back in line with moving correctly. Because remember, at the end of the day, and this is the final S, form is everything. The final S, Kinsey, you said form. Just wait. Okay, so let's just talk real fast what those 3 S's of where to start with resistance training, what they are. We have strong core, stability and balance, and solid foundations. So when we are talking about a strong core, it is so much more than sit-ups, right? So the core is over 29-ish muscles in our body. They could start at our hip flexors, go up even to the base of like our neck. They go up through the intercostals of our ribs. One of the best descriptions I've heard recently of how to define the core is to think of it as like a soup can, right? So we've got the bottom of the can, which is going to be that pelvic floor, and we've got the top of the fram, which is that diaphragm, and then we've got the rest of the can, which is the 360 around the spine, essentially, that protects our spine. Our core does everything from flexing and extending, bending over, standing up, side to side, flexion and extension, rotation. It moves us in all directions and keeps our spine safe doing it. When we're looking at lifting heavy weights, our core's job is to brace and protect the spine so that as we lift heavier and heavier weights, we're not compromising the integrity of our spinal column. When we're lifting floor to ceiling, again, very functional. So it's so much more than that 6-pack. In fact, I would argue that for a lot of us, just to do crunches or like sit-ups, when people think of core, that's often what comes to mind, is almost contraindicated, meaning it's not really recommended, because when we think about how the majority of us sit in modern day life, we're sitting at a desk, so our legs are bent. We're crunching over our computer, so the shoulders are rounded. Basically, that core is staying in sort of like a C shape, right? So every time we sit up, essentially, we're hitting that C shape. So if we're just doing crunches, we're continuing to train a muscle pattern that already brings us forward into this curve shape, right? We really want to think about the core as finding our ideal posture. So the core is so much more. That 6-pack, that's our rectus abdominis. I've talked about it before, probably. I love it because I think it sounds like a dinosaur. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm the only one, but it just makes me happy. But like I said, proper core work is so much more than a quote unquote core exercise. And the majority of okay, let me draw back. A lot of times when you see strength training professionals programming, there's actually not a lot of emphasis on like accessory core, because when you are lifting heavy weights, the best core moves you can do are squats and carries and deadlifts and presses and pulls, right? Because every time we are doing those compound exercises, those major movements, those 9 essential exercises that we've talked about in the past, you have to be using your core in order to do it correctly and safely. So that is why getting a strong core at the foundation level at the very beginning is everything. So what does that even look like? Since there are multiple sections of the core, my main goal, TBH, early on, is to just get clients familiar with engaging their core. It oftentimes is surprising when I start a client off how little control they actually have over their core. If I just were to tell you to brace your core, maybe you'd kind of have an idea, but for the most part, without training it, it's really hard to conceptualize what that even means. So one of the ways, sense that core, if we're thinking it as a canister, that I get started with training core, and when we do Fit After 40, our small group personal training, our first month, we're really focusing on building mind-body core connection so that we can brace it in heavier lifts. It starts more simple than you think it should. It's on your back, and it's working your breath. So that diaphragm, thinking of that as the top of the can, you can even sort of practice at home if it's safe to do so. Lie on the floor, one hand on your abdomen, one hand on your chest, so you make sure you're not shallow breathing and taking air into the chest and that it's going down into the belly. So it just starts. I like to close my eyes so I can really build that connection to my core. I breathe in and I just feel my belly expand. And then I exhale and I feel my belly contract. As my belly expands, that's the diaphragm expanding. As it contracts, that's the diaphragm contracting. So you do a couple rounds just focusing on that diaphragm, sinking that belly breath. Then we add the base of our canister, that pelvic floor. A lot of times when we hear pelvic floor exercises, we think of Kegels, that little like squeeze. Ooh, I don't know if you guys can hear that siren. Anyway, moving on. I'm not easily distracted. You are. Pelvic floor, we think of Kegels. However, it's not always the case that we have an underactive pelvic floor. It actually can be the case that we have an overactive pelvic floor. So just as important as the contraction of our pelvic floor is focusing on the release of the pelvic floor. So keeping your eyes closed, we've got that breathing in, expansion, breathing out, contraction down. Now we imagine, like if you're wearing a pair of underwear, if you were to pull your underwear up, you'd feel it on the undercarriage. So as we inhale, we soften through that area. The pelvic floor softens. As we exhale and the belly draws in, it's like giving yourself a wedgie, right? You're pulling up on that area. The whole undercarriage starts to lift. You inhale and the undercarriage relaxes. You exhale and the undercarriage lifts. So we're using both our diaphragm and our pelvic floor. And when we can work with those in unison, then we're really starting to dial in what will eventually lead to bracing through our core. Pelvic floor is skipped so often. I was definitely it took me pretty long into actually just really like learning specifically how to work with women's health that we even really talk about pelvic floor training in certifications. And honestly, shout out to Girls Gone Strong because they're the first certification program, they're menopause coaching specialist, where anyone's really even brought up the pelvic floor in a way that's any bigger than like, oh yeah, that's okay, moving on. It's important. Pelvic floor health is a huge deal. And it's one of those things that should just be a screening every woman has access to, but a lot of times insurance doesn't cover it unless you've just had a BB. So if you can get access to a pelvic floor therapist, do it. A lot of us have it and don't even realize it. Incontinence, peeing ourselves when we jump, low back pain. There's so many things that are related to pelvic floor dysfunction, and especially as we travel through perimenopause. Pelvic floor, because our joints start to get a little less lubricated, we can start to see a lot of urogenital issues, and pelvic floor dysfunction is actually a really, really common symptom that we don't talk about a lot that happens in perimenopause. So that's a great time to start working with a physio. Okay, so that's a very basic way. Like I said, Fit After 40, our first month, we start almost every session that way on our back, breathing for about 2 to 5 minutes just to turn on that initial core activation. Because again, what we're building is the brain's ability to connect to the core so that as we're moving into heavy lifts down the road, we don't have to focus so hard, right? We're just naturally doing it. We've built that connection. Those are firing intuitively. Other things that we are working on within the first 4 to 6 weeks when we're back or freshly back are focusing on what are called local core stabilizers. So those are the group of core muscles that are really responsible for, as it sounds, stabilizing through the spine, usually in static positions. So this can look like anything from a dead bug. We know them and we love them. And if you don't know them, Fit After 40, baby, I'll teach you to love them. This can look like a glute bridge hold. This can look like a glute bridge march eventually, but a glute bridge hold is the place to stay. Any sort of supported plank, supported side plank, bird dog. So basically where we're asking the core to stabilize and fight that anti-rotation of the spine. Again, this becomes really important for as we learn to brace later on, especially if you think of things like overhead presses or deadlifts. When we think about most of our bodies, one of the most common muscle imbalances is that there's a tendency to have an anterior pelvic tilt, or more commonly phrased, our butt sticks out. This can be a result of sitting because our hip flexors are a lot tighter. It can be a result of underactive glutes. It can be a result of low core weakness. It can be a result of all three. But when we have that anterior pelvic tilt, we often find that certain moves hurt our low back because we don't know how to fire and protect through that core. So we want to try to minimize the swoop back to the natural curve of the spine and not with the big old, with the booty stick out, right? Because we don't want to compress through that lumbar spine. So we're really just training our core to fire functionally and optimally. This kind of core makes its way into your day. It's actually a really good one when you're not in the gym to kind of just pay attention to how you're standing. If you kind of stand with that butt sticking out, a really good habit to get into is just thinking of scooping your pelvis in. One of my favorite cues for this is imagine putting on a tight pair of pants. You know that pair of jeans where you're like, I gotta really I hate this word, suck it in to button that button. That's what we're thinking of. And then throw out those pants because nobody wants to wear pants they don't feel good in. But use this as we've all worn one of those. So imagine how it feels when you're trying to button that almost too tight button. That is that brace, that scoop, that core activation and the glute activation that can really help to correct that overly anterior pelvic tilt and really just help down the line with better movement patterns. So eventually, after we're out of this first phase, we do become more proficient movers because, again, when we practice something, it begins to become a no-brainer. It is kind of a no-brainer. We're creating new neuromuscular patterns, but it also becomes a no-brainer, and we think about it less and less. So my goal for everyone I work with is to intuitively brace through their core before we pick up weights. Fun fact, low back pain oftentimes has a root cause within low core weakness. Because again, if our low core is weak and we have this swing to our hips and we're compressing through the lumbar spine, that can be one thing that people find can be really helpful with minimizing pain. There's a couple other things, but that's a whole different episode. Okay, so that is our first S, solid core. Second S is stabilization and balance. Balance. This is so important. So important. It is the foundation of movement to be able to balance, right? If we aren't able to balance on one leg, that sure as heck is going to translate into some sort of movement imbalance up our chain when we do other moves like squats, lunges, etc. Because if we can't balance on one leg, our stabilizers aren't really able to fire. And when it comes to healthy aging, one of the biggest reasons to do balance training besides effective moving is for fall prevention. We've talked about this a couple times in the podcast, but there are some pretty harrowing facts around fall prevention. I have them written somewhere, so I was going to see if I had it written down because they are pretty nuts. Okay, just one that I think I've shared before that's pretty wild is the fact that 20 to 30% of people over 50 who fall and break a hip will die within a year. That's too much. There's also some crazy fact where it's $80 billion went into health care related bills surrounding falls in the year 2020 alone. So in 2020, it's 5 years past that, my friends. Inflation be playing games with us. So that's way higher, and that's just falls alone. I always have said that movement and nutrition is preventative healthcare. It's one of those things that's hard to imagine if we haven't lived it, but being sick is very expensive. Even just little things start to rack up. I went to PT recently just for a shoulder thing, and it was 3 sessions and you're over $200. Imagine going in for chronic illness. Whatever we can do to keep you out of the hospital, the better. Am I right? Not only because of money too, but for morale. And things start to go really downhill, both in muscle loss, in bone density loss. Things can get really hard, and it's harder and harder to recover as we age. That's just a natural mechanism of aging. So the more we can invest in preventative care, the better. You work too hard Don't let your retirement dollars go towards hospital falls. Please take care of yourselves. Okay. This training, on top of being really important for fall prevention, which is one of the number one reasons I believe adults after 65 should start training, even if they never have, and just because you'll feel like a badass. It's also a non-negotiable to learn how to move well, because it helps us to identify and correct muscle imbalances, and it also gives us a lot of information about how our body is currently firing. So they kind of go hand in hand. I've shared this so many times, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I have yet to have someone walk into a studio and do an assessment with me who doesn't have a muscle imbalance. I have muscle imbalances. It's just natural. We spend 3 to 5 hours, maybe 6 hours a week in the gym, but every other hour we're out in the world holding our body in a different position. So our muscles are just going to naturally shorten along the length of whatever pattern we're holding them in. So not only is balance something that's important at the beginning to look for muscle imbalances as well as movement assessments, but it's something that you should be working with either a trainer or learn how to assess it for yourself continually, because new imbalances, even when we're doing the most, continue to pop up from time to time. That's just being a human with a skeleton. I've shared the story before too. It's one of my favorites. Just because we're strong does not mean that we are well balanced. When I coached at the CrossFit gym, I've talked about this a lot. You'd have people who could do crazy impressive amounts of weight. They would come back to do my boot camp. We'd always warm up with a single leg balance because we were about to do agility, and I wanted to make sure that they were firing correctly as we bound from one foot to the other. These people who could just blow my mind, like shocking amounts of weight they could pull, couldn't balance on one leg, because our body is very good at training what it needs to train to optimize your performance. So instead of focusing on like, oh, I need to focus on my ankle joint and the strength of my foot, it goes, this is 500 pounds. So in order to move it, I have to be able to use my butt. I have to be able to use my hamstrings, my quads. I've got to brace through my core. My lats have to be jacked. Okay, let's go. Let's rip it. But there's no need to prioritize those stabilizers, which is why balance continues to get integrated all throughout your programming. It's a really good thing to revisit. It's a really good litmus test for how things are going. If you find that you're having trouble with like range of motion, or if you're having instability or pain at the knee, bring it back to basics. Starting out, this is literally as simple, not easy, right? Literally as simple, with quotes, as a single leg balance. So you're on both feet. You start to shift the weight into one leg, activate through the foot, zip up through the quad, squeeze the glute, core is tight, bring that other leg to a high knee, and now you're balancing on one leg. It might surprise you. There's a couple different things too. Hands stay on your hip, because oftentimes we have a hip swing where one hip lifts or the other drops. So you're still creating imbalances along the leg. There also might be that swoop we talked about in the low spine. So really activating through the core. Again, there are so many little bitty movements that happen just in the leg alone, starting at the foot, to the ankle, to the knee, to the hip, to the lumbopelvic hip complex, to the shoulders, to the ear to shoulder alignment. It is all connected, which again, you know, I say it all the time. Exercise is a skill we need to learn because we don't know what we don't know. And when you can nail a really strong, solid balance, you're going to be in a league of your own at that point. That's one thing that so many people skip. And you can go easy at first. Not easy. Again, you can toggle it down, I should say. So the first thing, if you're kind of feeling shaky, if you've had trouble with balance before, hold on to something, right? Don't like put all your weight into it, but like you can use a wall, you can use a TRX, just have something, and then slowly start to train your body that it's okay to let go as you get more stable. You can start for 5 seconds of balance, 5 seconds of rest, move it up to 10 seconds of balance, 5 seconds of rest, 20 seconds, then 30 seconds, progressive overload, right? We build where we're at. Make sure that you're using a strong foot. Practice balancing at home without shoes on. This is why when I always talk about the importance of resistance training, I also never really poo-poo on yoga, because I do think yoga is a great way to cross-train with strength training. It gets woven into a lot of my programming because you're creating so much strength with the bare foot at the foot and ankle complex, which is where it all begins. You're also doing a lot of balance, a lot of single side movement. So it just has a lot of benefits in terms for your nervous system and that neuromuscular connection. But just start there. Eventually, that single leg balance can move into a single leg balance with a twist, with a ball toss, a single leg squat, a single leg hinge. It can move into a lot of different things. But again, we really want to make sure that that foundational balance is there because it trains everything up that leg. Have fun with it. There's a lot of ways we can incorporate balancing. We can do it in our warm-up. That's a definite. We can do it in our workout, in our Fit After 40 program, especially in our second month when we're looking more at muscular endurance. You might see something like a heavy chest press, and then we find a single leg bicep curl balance. So we're still working that balance, but now we're hitting fatigue muscle so you can work it into your program. And again, I say this all the time, add balance into your day. The more we can balance in our day, the better. We were doing a workshop, the Muscle and Menopause workshop, this last Monday. And afterwards, we had left the venue we were doing it at. I was standing outside with a couple of the women who had come to the workshop, and one of the women just started balancing, and I was like, that's right, sister. Way to implement what you learned right away. It can go anywhere. Plus, who knows? If you start balancing, maybe all your friends will. And then we all live happy, healthy, balanced lives together. So we have a strong core. We have a strong core, stabilizations, and balancing. And now we have our final S, which is solid foundation. And I've said this already on this podcast, and I will say it again and again and again. It is literally the reason that I decided to make Fit After 40 small group personal training and not group fitness. It is that form is everything. We need to be able to nail form to not only optimize our workouts, but to help train our bodies how to activate the right muscles that are working and to keep them safe from injury. Better results, less injury, and a lifetime of movement if you want it, right? That is everything. Exercise is a skill. Cannot say it enough. I've used so many comparisons on this show. We've talked about violin playing, guitar playing, dancing, ballet, all these things. The average human doesn't sit on Instagram and go, I could definitely do that right now. But for some reason, and this is like a plus and a minus, a lot of people see fitness on Instagram and go, I could do that. Here's the deal. Yeah, you can. Literally bring me something you want to learn how to do, and we will figure out how to get you there. But we do still have to learn what we are doing. Those 9 foundational movements that we talk about all the time, the squat, the hinge, the lunge, the vertical press, the horizontal press, the pull, the plank, the rotational one. I'm missing another one, but that's okay. You know what I'm talking about. Those 9 foundations, these are things that I see done incorrectly all of the time. Like I said, it is the reason that I went with a small group container and not a group container, because small group personal training, it caps each cohort at 6 people, which is a small enough level that I can make sure you are getting personal training quality details all the way down to what direction your foot is positioned. I've said it before on the show too. Just watch. 5 to 10 years from now, I truly believe that group fitness will still be here. But I do believe that small group personal training is the shift that we are making as a field. And it's good. I'm glad we are. It makes personal training more accessible, and it keeps the quality of community high, because community is such a big piece of our health as well. So, point is, without form, we're kind of cooked. That's really at the basis of everything that comes next. We don't add a heavy weight until we know we're moving safely and we know we're moving optimally. So what does that look like when we're getting started? It can mean a lot of different things, right? Part of it means breaking up different moves. At the beginning of this month, we've talked about my top 5 favorite lower body and upper body exercises for beginners. go back and listen to those. A lot of what is in those are training the movement pattern. So like with a squat, we start with a step up so that we're training that single leg firing. We start with a wall sit, so we're building the muscular endurance. We start with a tap squat, so we're training the pattern of the squat. We break it down into bite-sized pieces so that your body has a chance to learn it. And then eventually it can continue to add pieces. Eventually, we move to just a body weight squat without the surface below us. Then we can add a weight to it. Then we can add more weight to it. Then we can add a transverse aspect. So things can really open up. Just like when we know notes on the violin, we can start to play a lot of different songs. Once we have the foundation of thinking of each exercise as its own skill. Once I have the foundations of a squat, I've got a lot available to me, right? I've got sumo squats, I've got narrow squats, I've got cyclist squats, I've got barbell back squats, barbell front squats, hang squats, I've got dumbbell goblet squats, dumbbell suitcase squats, I've got elevated or heels up squats, the sissy squat, I've got Bosu squats, squat. Everybody clap your hand. Oh, that's not how the song goes. I was trying to think of squat shots. Anyway, point is, the world opens up. And not only does the world open up, but it opens up safely. Because again, when I created Fit After 40, it took me time. It's been about 3 years where I realized that it was time for me to really invest in my own studio. But I wanted to make sure that when I had a gym again, I did own a gym in LA, when I had my own gym again, that it was really touching on something that I felt the industry was missing. And I spent 3 years kind of exploring what that would be and getting a vibe for what was missing in the fitness world while continuing to work in a corporate gym and be in Planet Fitness often to train one-on-one clients, just to be immersed so I could see in real time. And there were two really big things missing. The first one, the reason I have this podcast, access to information about women's health. It is just irresponsible that we do not have information about women's health through every single stage of womanhood, but especially the fact that we're just only now starting to talk about perimenopause in a real way, and there's still so many question marks even within our practitioners. So women's health, that was just, it needs to be out there. Women's health is not a niche. We are 51% of the population. We live longer than men, but we live sicker than men. That paradigm needs to change yesterday. So that was number one. Number two, there is nothing out there that I've seen and I have explored that is designed to really help a beginner set themselves up for success for as long as they want to lift. Even group fitness classes that are designed for beginners, while the programming sometimes can be headed in the right direction, the same issue arises where when you have a class of 7+ people, it becomes, and not even consistently, right? So if like Becky is coming in and I see her once a month, I'm so glad she's coming in, but we don't have time to work together to really build her form. And if there's over 7 people, even the best coaches have a very difficult time allocating their energy to make sure everybody's form is nailing the foundations. So within that capacity, it doesn't really exist. Personal training for the most part is where you find it, but a lot of personal trainers, bless them, are in it because they care about people and want to help them hit goals. But a lot of them are dropping into training sessions coming from where they're at. So that you see a lot of cookie cutter workouts. You see a lot of I was one of these new people doing what they've learned, but not necessarily training the person in front of them. And then you have DIY, which is kind of the space where you start to see lifting for beginners. I even have a couple of DIY strength training for beginners, but I will be the first person to say that just because the program is well designed for beginners, it doesn't teach you form. It just can't. It's a piece of paper. We don't know what we don't know, right? It's, I heard the quote the other day where it's if you're your own therapist, fire yourself. Or something like that, right? Where it's basically our thinking got us here. So why would we continue on with that? We have to outsource help. Same with movement. If we're our own coach, fire yourself, find someone else because you don't know what you don't know. And the goal is for you to move well, to move safely for forever so that everything else in your life becomes more accessible little bit easier and a lot more fun, right? What we do in the gym translates to functionality outside, especially as we age. Don't even get me started on all the health benefits when we're talking about Alzheimer's and heart disease and sarcopenia and osteoporosis. It's just, to me, a no-brainer. But I live in this space. So my hope with these things like the podcast and with the menopause and muscle workshop on the 28th of October, 6 p.m. Central Time, mark it. It is fine with me if you walk away still uncertain if fitness is for you. What I hope all of these resources that I put out into the world do, at the very least, is make you a little more curious, make you a little more interested in learning about how to take care of yourself in a way that is supportive and sustainable and free of shame. So that's why I do what I do. I'm so excited to be doing it. We talked about today the 3 S's to remember when you are getting started with resistance training. So that is going to be strong core, stabilization and balance, and solid foundation/form. It's a great place to start. Like I said, there is going to be a link in the show notes. On the 28th of this very month, we have our first online, open to the public, free muscle and menopause workshop. If you can't make it, still sign up. There's going to be a recording, but we do have a Q&A, and I have found from other groups that I've run in the past, we get a lot more out of it when we can be there in person. But if you can't, don't worry about it. I'll still send you a recording. If you have friends, loved ones who you feel like you could benefit from or who could benefit from this as well, share the link. If you want to do this together, you got a workout buddy, you guys have been talking about it, bring them. The more, the merrier. I literally will stay on the Q&A as long as you guys want to stay there. I could talk about this stuff forever. But in the meantime, thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. You know it means the world to me, and it means so much that you are thinking enough about taking care of that amazing body and brain to sit through a full episode. So until next week, hopefully I see you beforehand, because by the time the next podcast is released, we will have already done our webinar. Take care of your beautiful body and brain. You're so stinking worth it. Hope to see you on Tuesday. Aroo! Sign up is in the show notes. Bye-bye.